No storm at sea cuts so deep as the storm that rises inside a man's soul. There be treasures in the Torah, me hearties, treasures not forged in silver or gold, but treasures formed through exile, through fire, and through faith. For on this voyage, we enter Shemot, and we walk beside a man whose destiny runs opposite the stories the world calls success. For every great journey begins long before the world sees its first step. A decree rises in Egypt, every Hebrew son cast into the Nile. But a mother, Yocheved, refuses to surrender her child to death. For 3 months she hides him, holding him in trembling hope until the walls can no longer hold back fear or faith. For when a mother can no longer shield her child with her arms, she must trust Hashem to carry him further than she can reach. So she places him in a woven basket, sealed with tar and sealed with tears, and sets him upon the waters of the Nile. Miriam watches from the reeds, caught between fear and hope. Sometimes salvation comes from where no one expects it. And it is there that Pharaoh's daughter finds the child. She knows he is Hebrew, yet compassion enters her heart. She draws him from the water and gives him a name, Moshe. For I drew him from the river. And the child who was born beneath a decree of death now walks in the very courts of kings. He was raised as a prince, but this was not his home. He grows up in Pharaoh's palace, fed at royal tables, clothed in garments of power, taught the wisdom of Egypt. A prince in a kingdom not his own. For though he wore the robes of Egypt, his heart never forgot his brothers. And there comes a day when a man can no longer turn his eyes away from suffering. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he looks this way and that way, to the fore, to the mast. For there was no man to stand in defense of the innocent. And Moshe strikes the Egyptian, not from hatred, but because his soul could not stay silent before cruelty. But even a righteous action can carry a cost that a man must spend the rest of his life carrying. Eventually, the deed returns to his ears, and Moshe knows that the sands of Egypt cannot hide what heaven has seen. So he flees. And in a single day, the prince of Egypt becomes a man with no home, no safety, no future in sight. And yet, some of our sages whisper an even deeper grief, a grief of lives left behind. Some teach that before the wilderness of Midian, Moshe may have had a household in Egypt, perhaps a wife, perhaps even children. A life he may have kept if he had chosen silence. Because nay, how could you be a prince of Egypt and not have these things? Savvy? But his calling would not let him look away. And the road before him was paved with loss, with separation, with unanswered grief. For when a man walks away from everything he has ever known, he does not step into safety. He steps into wilderness. So he becomes a wanderer neath the desert sky, a stranger, without roof or belonging, without a place to rest his soul. And it is there, not in the palace, but in exile, that Hashem begins to shape his calling. For sometimes, the road to purpose passes through obscurity. In Midian, Moshe defends the daughters of Yethro, and the prince becomes a shepherd. He takes a wife, Zipporah, and they bear 2 sons. Gershom, for I was a stranger in a foreign land. Eleazar, for the God of my fathers saved me from Pharaoh's sword. These are not merely names. They are prayers carved into a wounded soul. And in the silence, where no one sees a man's tears but God, the fire appears. The bush burns with holy fire, yet it is not consumed. For the fires of wilderness do not come to destroy. They come to refine. And here, the Torah sets before us. The Torah sets before us a tale of 2 destinies. Yosef's life rises from pit to prison to palace. He builds a household in Egypt and is buried there in honor. He begins at the lowest possible point and is raised high. But Moshe begins in honor and walks away from it. He could have remained, could have lived in comfort, could have been buried in respect like Yosef before him. But Hashem did not call Moshe to the life the world applauds. He called him to a calling that would cost him absolutely everything. Some people would look at the life of Moshe and see only loss. They would say that he walked away from comfort and position. They would say that he had everything and left it behind. They would say that his life turned downward in a single moment. But hear ye now, if he had remained in Egypt, if he had stayed silent, if he had lived out his days in honor inside the courts of Pharaoh, avast, listen well, our people would have remained in chains. There would be no cry of deliverance. There would be no crossing of the sea. There would be no covenant in Sinai. And there would be no Torah placed into the hands of Israel. For the path that looked like failure to the world was the very road through which Hashem redeemed his people. And some stories in the Torah are not only history to remember, they are mirrors held before our own lives. Most of us, if we were to be entirely honest, when we see those interacting in the culture in our midst, when we see the shopkeepers and the pub owners and the wealthy elite business folk, most of us dream of that type of a life. We view that as success. In short, most of us dream of a Yosef life, from obscurity to success, from struggle to recognition, from wilderness to palace. But some of you walk a Moshe path. You once had stability, a life that made sense, and then everything changed. You lost what others kept. Your road turned to exile. Your calling did not lead to applause, but to wilderness. And if we were to be honest, in most cases, to bitterness as well. Some even feel that the only purpose of your life has been to serve as a warning. But hear this truth. The wilderness is not where Hashem abandons you. It is where he forms you. The wilderness is not where Hashem abandons you. It is where he forms you. For the wilderness is not only a place in Torah. It is a path our people have walked across centuries and continents. A journey carried in our memory and in our very blood. And among the sons of Seraphat, there was one who walked that same road of exile, courage, and faithfulness. His name was Shmuel HaNagid. He was born in Andalusia, in the golden age of Jewish Spain, at a time when our people lived under shifting kingdoms, uncertain crowns. When the danger rose against the Jews of his city, Shmuel and his family fled into exile. He knew from his earliest days what it meant to be uprooted. But in that exile, Hashem planted a fire within him. For Shmuel HaNagid became a master of Torah, a sage of law, a poet of the soul, and a leader of Israel in the courts of foreign kings. He governed with justice, defended his people, and used his influence to guard Jewish life in a fragile world. And yet, he also led armies into battle, carrying the weight of lives and judgment upon his shoulders. But when the courts grew silent and the battlefields lay still, Shmuel HaNagid would return home, sit by candlelight, and write prayers, songs of exile and longing, words born from the same wilderness that Moshe once walked. Build me up like a tower upon the heights of your sanctuary. For nearly 1,000 years I have declared my sorrow with many tears and with fasting. Will you not answer me? From the poems of Shmuel HaNagid. Shmuel HaNagid lived between two worlds, between crowns, between the praise of men and the fear of heaven. He wore the garments of authority, but his heart remained bound to Torah and his people, and to the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. For he teaches us that the greatest leaders in Israel are not forged in comfort, but in exile. They are forged in sacrifice and in the quiet faith of those who remain steadfast, even when they must walk between worlds. For the world judges what is seen upon the surface, but Hashem looks to the treasure within, where wounds become wisdom and suffering becomes gold, refined in holy fire. So if you walk a wilderness road, Lift your head, mate, for the fires in the wilderness burn, but they do not consume. The fires in the wilderness burn, but they do not consume. They do not come to end you. They come to reveal the strength Hashem has placed within you. And when he calls your name, as he calls your name, listen for it, as he calls your name, as he called to Moshe, may you rise from exile, not as one who failed, but as one who was prepared in the wilderness for holy calling. If this episode spoke to your heart, leave a word below so your voice is remembered here. And if you know another soul who walks a wilderness road, share this with them, for they may need to hear that their exile is not the end of their story. It is only the beginning. May the wind in your sails be filled with Hashem's righteousness, and may the evil urge plunge straight into Davy Jones' locker. Shalom. I look forward to seeing you on our next voyage.